All right. Well, welcome everyone. Today, Collision, we're going to be talking about the Collision for Sustainable Development Goal number 11. That's Sustainable Cities and Communities. And just to give a few, actually, why don't we get started with introductions of the sort of the team that's here today talking to you. So I'm Katie Pelican. I am the co-director of the Strategic Partnership and Research Collaborative, or SPARC. I'm also co-leading with Karen Brown the Sustainable Development Goal Initiative here at the university. I'm also leading right now a University COVID Action Network under SPARC. My background is in veterinary medicine, thus my wildlife species in the background. I have different ones every week for themes for the week. So I'm a wildlife veterinarian by training, but have mostly been wrangling interdisciplinary groups of people for the last 10 years. So, but this is my connection to my roots. Lynn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Lynn Shane. I'm Associate Director in Corporate and Foundation Relations at the University of Minnesota Foundation. And I work on interdisciplinary philanthropic grants and gifts. So we work with private foundations and with corporations and corporate foundations. So I'm going to share later on some private foundation opportunities around the housing topic.
Great. And Kendra, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, this is Kendra McCormick-Grull. I manage communications for the Strategic Partnerships and Research Collaborative, and I also work with the new Sustainable Development Goal Initiative at the U as well.
And Karen can't be with us today, but she is part of our team. So she is also leads the Interdisciplinary Center for the Study of Global Change and has been working with SDGs for a long time. Far longer than me, actually. So welcome. So just a few kind of housekeeping notes on the collision, that we're being recorded and we will be sharing the video. If you could please not use video unless you're talking, that would be appreciated. We don't have a huge group today, so we can be a little more flexible. If you could mute your microphone if you're not talking. If you have a question or comment, if you could use chat, or I think we can probably, if you really want to talk, if you could just raise your hand in Zoom, that would be appreciated. And if you're interested in the slide deck, I think it was maybe sent out to you, but you can also find it at this link, and we'll be sending it out also with the video. So today we're going to do some welcome. We'll give you a chance to introduce yourselves as well. And then I'm going to just talk a little bit about the Sustainable Development Goal Initiative and Sustainable Development Goals themselves. And then Lynn will be talking a little bit about foundation funding in this SDG. I am going to talk a little bit about US government funding. And then we're going to have a little chance, probably not too long, but maybe 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes, to just talk a little bit about how we can foster this work at the university, and then some wrap up. So I think we can probably, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and just introducing yourself, and I'll just call on you because I think that's the most efficient way of doing this as you come up. So Pat, would you like to introduce yourself?
Right, yeah, Pat Hellman. I am Associate Professor in Bioproducts and Biosystems Engineering and run the Cold Climate Housing Program. My specialty, if you will, is building and energy systems, building science. And in terms of kind of how it relates to this goal, I would say high performance buildings, I think, are pretty essential for sustainable and resilient communities.
Great.
That's kind of my area.
Thanks. Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Benasuti. I work in the Office for Public Engagement. I coordinate community partnerships in the office. One piece of that is coordinating a partnership with the university district neighborhoods. So that's the 4 neighborhoods that surround the Minneapolis campus. So when I think about, and what drew me to today's conversation was when I think about sustainable cities and communities, I'm primarily thinking about the neighborhoods and community that surround the university Minneapolis campus.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Jake?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. Jake Akervik. I work with HUD, or for HUD, I should say, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development out of the Minneapolis field office. My primary role is working on the North Minneapolis Promise Zone Initiative, which is in our kind of 5th of 10 years place-based initiative led by the city of Minneapolis. And we have a lot of partners, including University of Minnesota and UROC. And so I've been having conversations for quite a while with folks like Pat and Makeda and James and whoever else is on this call. I kind of whipped through the list quick, so if I missed anyone, I apologize. But we have a lot of conversations around multidisciplinary issues and approaches, affordable housing, economic development, transit-oriented development, and so on. And so just joining the conversation to see what's going on and where we're fitting in all this.
Great. Thank you. So there's someone who's just listed as Lemlem. Does that sound familiar to anyone? I think you're no longer on mute. Could you introduce yourself? No, I'll move on and maybe they'll come back to them. Makeda?
Hello, I'm Makeda Zulu Gillespie. I'm the Executive Director of UROC. Jake already referred to the work that we're doing. We had a conversation with Eric last week to talk more about affordable housing, and he told us about this group, and we wanted to listen in and see if there's a way that we can work together.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. James?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Jake and Makeda, I think, covered everything. I also work at UROC and have been working with Pat and Eric now, Makeda, Jake, on what we can do around housing initiatives, but also economic development and what that looks like, especially through a sustainability lens.
Great. Thank you. Abby?
Hi, my name is Abby Asojo. I am a faculty in interior design in the College of Design. I'm also the Associate Dean for Research, Creative Scholarship and Engagement. So I'm here representing the college to learn more about ideas I can take back to the college to my colleagues. And in terms of my own work, I focus on cross-cultural issues in design, as well as more recently, I've been working to close the inequities and the achievement gap in K-12 education by bringing design education to underrepresented communities.
Jan?
Hi, I'm Jan Franson. I'm with University Libraries, and I'm the lead for Experts in Minnesota. I'm here to learn more about all of the goals. So I'm attending or watching the recordings of all of the sessions you've been doing, thinking a lot about how we can use the data that we collect in Experts at Minnesota to show what the university is already doing in each of these goals, and also looking at how can we put together teams, how do we use the data that we have to put together teams for future work.
Great. I'd actually love to talk to you sometime wearing my, well, both the sustainable goal and Spark hat.
Anytime.
Great. Let's see, Eric.
Hi, I'm Eric Singsauce. I guess I'm responsible for bringing a few of these people here.
Yeah.
I'm Director for Materials and Bioeconomy at the University's Natural Resources Research Institute up in Duluth. And we have the group I lead is a pretty wide ranging from construction materials and techniques all the way through biochemicals and energy products. And I think the two programs that were relevant to this are the work that we're doing on advanced offsite construction and materials with my colleagues here, as well as our engagement with Better Futures Minnesota and building deconstruction and retraining people for these new kinds of construction industries. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Amy?
Hi, Amy Kircher. I co-direct Spark with Katie. My background is public health. I'm an epidemiologist by training.
Great. Karen, you joined us. You want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. This is Karen Brown. I direct the Interdisciplinary Center for the Study of Global Change. And I also am co-leading a university-wide initiative on the Sustainable Development Goals with Katie. And I am a political scientist by training.
Great. And then, have I missed anyone? Okay. Still have the Lem person, but she's not responding. They're not responding. So, okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. It's exciting to see the group. We did have a collision around housing specifically that Eric actually initiated back in, I'm almost nervous to say December, but it feels like it was so long ago. But, you know, so this is, it's exciting to kind of see this sort of groups that are mobilized by this topic around this, around our campuses. So collisions in general, we seek to collide faculty partners towards sharing research, forming teams, linking teams to potential funding opportunities. So we'll be doing all of that today. Just to give a quick introduction to the initiative on Sustainable Development Goals here. We've already been introduced to Karen and myself as the co-leads. This is, we're supported under the GPS Alliance, which is our international office at the university. So we thank them for their support, but it's really designed to be a university-wide initiative. So those of you who are not familiar necessarily with the Sustainable Development Goals, there's 17 goals. These were launched in 2015. They're 30-year goals, and they're really a combination of what used to be the Millennium Development Goals and the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. So you're trying to take a really holistic look at how to sustainably develop the world. And what's different also about Sustainable Development Goals compared to the other two I mentioned is that these goals are really designed to be applicable anywhere in the world. This is not just about sort of international development as we often refer to it. It's really about every entity in the world really taking a look at their own sustainable development and having some framework for advancing their own work in a sustainable way. So this is applicable here in the Twin Cities or in rural communities as it is, and here in our state as it is in anywhere else in the world. Our initiative is really, you know, we're actually thinking of it as state-driven first, even though we are supported by GPS Alliance. They are very committed to sort of global, if you will, that local is global and global is local. And we recognize that there is tremendous need right here in our own backyard for some of the approaches that SDGs represent. So really state driven. And so we're really trying to tie what we're doing to state issues. And then from there, expand them outward to national, then to global. We really are interested in supporting teams around these SDGs. One of the ways we're thinking of doing that is by working with existing interdisciplinary centers as groups that are already sort of cutting across colleges, cutting across disciplines, and are topical. So where possible, if there's already groups that are working around particular SDGs, we're trying to work with them. So not creating new necessarily. And really thinking about it as a way to facilitate this work. So aligning programs, leveraging investments, helping teams find resources, for example. So it's really a sort of a catalyst, we're thinking of it, more than, you know, an initiative that will create big new things without working with existing groups. So our initial work, and we've really only been in existence for about 6 months now, has been to map existing work at the University of Minnesota against the SDGs, and then also map work within the state that's affiliated with the SDGs, and try and, you know, connect those two, sort of link or identify areas where our work intersects with state goals. We're also, for the university, doing some reporting work. So the Times rankings group has an SDG ranking. That's what they really use as an impact ranking. So we're helping the university prepare to submit for that ranking. And through that, I think taking a kind of a look at metrics around SDGs. And then we're also thinking about creating innovation labs and hubs, and that's one of the things we've been talking to centers about. But I think actually the housing group is probably, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, is probably a good example of what we're hoping to achieve. And then really thinking about it as sort of an outreach toolkit that, like the suite of webinars, we're doing webinars, there's a webinar next week, and then, you know, these collisions, and the idea is to sort of raise the profile of work here at the university and provide resources to advance that work. So we are having some upcoming webinars. Actually tomorrow, sorry. We have one on food justice in Minnesota. Then we're planning one on inequality and diversity in August. And then in September, actually, we're hoping to have one on housing. So we probably will be reaching out to a number of, maybe some folks on this call who are involved in housing. So just to give us kind of an example of what we mean by this sort of innovation team or work is actually, and we've used this a number of ways, is looking at goal 11. So, and just a little more about what we're doing today also, this will help set the stage. So SDGs are set up as with targets and then indicators. So these are the targets for goal 11. And you'll see that they're, you know, it's about equitable housing. It's about sustainable urbanization is a big effort. Sustaining cultural and natural heritage. So looking at sort of resilience to disasters for communities. Safe and inclusive spaces, thinking about disabilities, access for people with disabilities. So it's, you know, it's pretty wide ranging. And a lot of it is related to housing, but not everything. A lot of it is also about environmental health, for example. How do we create living environments in communities and cities that are safe, sustainable, and healthy? So, so just to sort of, then we would get down, these are just some example indicators that are under the different targets. So, and I think we'll, you know, the housing group, for example, really focuses on this one. So 11.1 to ensure that access for all to adequate, safe, and affordable housing and basic services. So, you know, and then proportion of urban population living in slums, informal settlements, or inadequate housing, right? So, you know, each one actually has very specific indicators, each of these targets, and then each of the goals. So, you know, it really does create this quite specific roadmap for how we as a society can progress. And then, you know, what we hope to do, and, you know, I think we use this as an example because in some ways, the group that we supported in the collision in December really represented the kind of group we're looking to help support, groups that are interested in making a difference in the world. They come from many different areas of the university. They have external partners that we can work with. There are very specific housing targets and goals that the state, the country, there's a lot of international issues around housing as well. So there's important issues to address both locally, nationally, and then internationally. And we can start making, you know, making those connections and linking those things. So, you know, I think this is sort of an example of what we're hoping to achieve with this initiative. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Lynn to talk a little bit about some of the funding from the foundation perspective for this area. Just tell me when you want me to turn.
Go ahead to the next one. Great. Okay. So if I don't think any of you were on our last call about, we were talking about SDG number 10. A lot of these, as you might, is readily apparent, are all of these SDGs have some crossovers or other areas where, you know, there's a close alignment of goals, and one is achievement of one goal is going to impact another SDG. But this graph actually comes from foundation giving data from the Charities Aid Foundation. And they were looking to see, they matched up the SDGs to the top private foundation funders. And when they were looking at the SDGs by grant size, number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, emerges as an area of prominence in, as one of the top 5 at all the different levels of foundation giving, but more so at the under 100,000. Next slide. So this is the list of the top 20. No, it should be 25. Let me see. Is it just not
25.
showing up? Okay, it's just not showing on my screen for some reason. Yes, there are 25 of them. And unfortunately, there are no open RFPs in any of these, but I think that there are some that I have highlighted here and I've provided a link to that we should put on a watch list, because they do, either they take some unsolicited proposals, or they will be putting out RFPs in the near future. So Kellogg reviews grant proposals throughout the year if they align with their priorities, and they're not taking any proposals right now for work in Southern Africa or Northeast Brazil, just rather specific. But for their equitable communities opportunities, they support innovative models and programs throughout the US and with sovereign tribes, but they prioritize their grant making in a number of select places as well, including Michigan, Mississippi, New Mexico, New Orleans, and as well as Mexico and Haiti. So they do support the general, you know, United States, but they have priorities in specific places. So you might want to just keep that in mind. Ford's housing topic is challenging inequality in cities and states, and they will take ideas submissions, and there's a link to that in this slide. And if they're interested, they'll respond within 45 days. Ford recognizes the need for a new chapter for housing in America, and they're especially interested in fresh approaches to organizing and advocacy that will mobilize new champions in the community. They also want to expand public revenue and public-private finance to advance affordable housing. Wells Fargo, housing affordability is one of their top priorities, along with financial health and small business growth. They had advertised a $20 million housing affordability project, and they're interested in breakthrough innovations. And overall, they committed $1 billion over the last 6 years to help American families find safe, affordable homes. However, the Wells Fargo Foundation has made changes due to COVID-19, and they're currently working with their existing portfolio of grantees and are not currently accepting new applications. And they ask that we check back later in the year for opportunities. The University of Minnesota Foundation has a strong donor relationship with Wells Fargo, so please check in with us at Corporate and Foundation Relations with me, or I can connect you with somebody else on our team who does regular work with Wells Fargo, and we may be able to help you submit something to them. Kresge has some programs that accept applications on an ongoing basis, and others proactively invite or solicit applications from individual organizations, and on occasion a program might make a national call for applications. There are no open RFPs right now for their American Cities grants, but watch for open funding opportunities, again, by clicking on this link on the slide, or checking with our Corporate and Foundation Relations RFP lists. And if you're not on that listserv already, let me know and we'll make sure that we put you on it. Another one for the watch list is the JP Morgan Chase Foundation. They launched a $500 million 5-year initiative to invest in solutions that bolster long-term vitality of the world's cities and communities within them that are not benefiting from economic growth. And the grants are for up to $5 million. The 2020 competition is closed, but again, watch for a 2021 opportunity. The Bank of America Charitable Foundation, their housing RFP just closed a few weeks ago, and they've diverted $100 million to support communities in the COVID crisis, but again, another one to watch for upcoming RFPs. The Knight Foundation invests in cities where the Knight brothers once owned newspapers, so Duluth and St. Paul, Minnesota are areas of investment. In Duluth, you can apply for funding through the Duluth Superior Community Foundation, and in St. Paul, Knight supports inclusive business ecosystems, economic growth, a more vibrant downtown, and building community through arts. And if you want to contact our office at charitablegrants@umn.edu for help in approaching Knight or any of the other ones I just mentioned. Next slide. So again, here's the email address where you can contact us. And I want to mention some local foundations as well. Again, there aren't any RFPs that are open, well, except for Blandon. Blandon, it gives up to $50,000, and their deadline is December 31st. And their giving is mostly in Itasca County, and they want to strengthen foundations, or strengthen housing availability in sustainable, healthy communities. The Bush Foundation, you probably are all aware of their community innovation funds. That's open right now. The Polad Foundation is, one of their priorities is affordable housing. They have not indicated what they're going to do for 2020 or 2021. They've closed their 2019 giving opportunities, but affordable housing is definitely one of their top priorities. The Graves Foundation, same thing. Their housing initiative is one of their key initiatives, but they've redirected their funding to COVID-19 as well. So, but another foundation that we can keep our eyes on for the future. And that's all I've got.
Thanks, Lynn. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about you know, this is just a recent, very recent search I did for US government funding, a little bit about, you know, how these different agencies fund. It's nice to have someone from HUD on the call because maybe you have some further ideas. I'm not that familiar with HUD, but HUD is on the list too. So NIH, of course, focuses on health, so environmental health, and with that, I think there's opportunities under this SDG to you know, search for things like this, particularly you know, how built environments in particular can contribute to health. So this, these are just a couple of examples of funding that's out right now. But I think it's not too unusual to find this kind of funding available from NIH. This is, I think, a particularly interesting one. There's a notice of intent to publish a hub for interdisciplinary research and training in global environmental and occupational health research. So it's a UO1 for those of you who are familiar with the alphabet and number gobbledygook of NIH. So this was estimated to be posted, but has not been posted yet, and estimated to be an application. So it's really a forecast of, they're hoping to issue 2 solicitations, and they didn't give an amount, but presumably it will be fairly large since it's basically a center kind of grant. And another example is assessing and addressing community exposures to environmental contaminants. So environmental contaminants, pollution in community settings, that's something that NIH is interested in and also fits under this Sustainable Development Goal. So that's due December 4th and to the level of about $400,000. NSF, well, maybe it's partly because most of the awards we look at under SPARK, for example, are more interdisciplinary science, but they are increasingly focused on interdisciplinary science and convergence, which, you know, issues of housing sort of falls under, or at least community and, you know, cities, sustainable cities and communities. So this is an example. This is actually due in a year, but something maybe to consider is environmental convergence opportunities in chemical bioengineering, environmental and transport systems. And specifically, one of their topics of interest is having efficient, healthy, and resilient cities. So plus pollution and waste. So many of these things will fall under this Sustainable Development Goal, but particularly thinking about the group that's on the call today, I think this could be an interesting opportunity to think about. They didn't really give a ceiling per award. They gave a total amount, and they said they were going to try and fund about seven awards. So that calculated out to about 1.2 million per award. USAID, this is all, of course, international funding, but they have many topics that fit under SDG 11. And as we talked about with Sustainable Development Goals, you know, there's a lot of overlap among them. So USAID's areas of work vaguely, I would say, align to SDGs, but not completely. So, you know, I think I would suggest you can either search USAID, and I usually will look at forecasts rather than look at grants that are actually issued, and that's under a different website. So you should search for USAID forecasts if you're interested in USAID, because when they actually issue an award, they usually issue it with at most 6 weeks before it's due. So it's, you know, usually to get USAID funding, you really need to think about it long before they actually issue the grant. So these are 2 forecasted opportunities that just give an example of the kind of funding, but there's a wide variety of funding, and a lot of it goes into countries. So sometimes it's easiest just to keep an eye on what's being funded within a country you're interested in. So Cities for Enhanced Governance and Engagement, this is a lot more about local governance questions and for sustainability in the urbanizing world. So often USAID funding comes in very high numbers from what we're used to, so $10 to $25 million ceiling. This is for Philippines. It's not been issued yet, even though often they go off the forecasts don't actually accurately tell you when they're going to come out. And then related is enhancing WASH activities. So this is sanitation and hygiene questions in communities. And again, you know, high ceiling, it's forecasted not until December, and it's in Ghana. So just to sort of a sense of the kinds of funding that could be available through USAID. And these are a couple of things out of HUD. And we have someone from HUD here, so maybe he has more to say on this, but just some examples of open grants that, you know, they're both due in August. So I try and give a little longer leeway, longer timeline for grants I might be talking about in a collision like this, but these were two that I think just give examples of the kind of funding that can be available for a university around HUD. So a lot of analytics and, you know, it's not so much research as helping the, I think, HUD and housing make good decisions. I don't know, Jake, is that who? Do you have anything to add to that?
That's me. Yeah, I have things to add. How much time you got? I'll give you the elevator.
Yeah.
I'll give you the elevator speech. So the Promise Zone initiative, again, is focused on North Minneapolis, but I do help partners around the state with looking at federal funding and not just HUD funding, because, you know, part of my role is it's easy for me to go to HUD people and get HUD information. And so what I try and learn is really the sphere of federal programs beyond HUD. I will say, in taking a quick look at grants.gov, there are 2 additional HUD opportunities right now. There is one is social and economic impacts of the CDBG and home programs that has, I think, 2 awards out, and that's due on August 17th. There's also another one that I think is an annual that comes out of HUD policy development and research, and that gives them authority to accept unsolicited proposals for research partnerships.
Okay.
I think the deadline on that one is end of the calendar year, but I believe, again, that's more of a semi pseudo rolling application that they throw out at some point every year. I will say that, you know, before my federal career, actually, I was going to say before I got back into housing and community engagement, I worked for MnDOT's research program, which had a very tight partnership with the university and the Center for Transportation Studies. And then after that, I worked for Department of the Interior, Bureau of Reclamation, which was mostly intramural research. But some university partnerships. And I'm not an academic, and I'm not a researcher, not a scientist, not an engineer. But I will say that, just to throw it out there, is that I think it's really great to scan all these opportunities and think about which ones the university can apply for. And I think the trick here is really to figure out what the university's role as an anchor institution wants to be in leading these research partnerships, and how, you know, we can really, you know, do we want to stay in the basic research domain? And when I say basic, I'm not using the terminology properly, I don't think, but do we want to dip more into innovation and applied research and really try and move things in that direction where we can have an impact on communities like North Minneapolis? You know, sometimes we're trying to serve all stakeholders, which means that, you know, we're doing research and we're trying to apply to the whole Twin Cities or the whole state. Because, you know, part of that is land grant, university mission. And so I think there's decisions that have to be made in some of these, when we have these discussions about not only what's gone after for funding, but really how we're going to focus the funding down, and what the university's role is going to be in trying to actually take things and apply them to these real world problems that are happening, especially for you know, for African Americans in North Minneapolis. That's my spiel.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's great. Would you mind adding those 2 opportunities into the chat box, and we can
I will totally do that right now. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. And actually, I think it would be great to have a separate conversation with you too. All these people I want to talk to, especially, you know, just in terms of that experience of, because we've had, you know, Eric and hosted the Collision on Housing back in December, but there's other groups that are also interested in housing. And so, you know, it'd be great to sort of tap you for your experience in kind of where universities might find funding, but also that question of You know, what does the university want to do? We want to get to that in terms of the discussion. So hold that and we can chat more. Yeah.
I'm happy to join that conversation, but just to let you know too, Makeda and Eric and Pat and James are all well aware of my spiel, and I work with them on the regular. So you know, I don't necessarily have to be the lead on that conversation, but I am here and I'm happy to have whatever conversation you all as a group want to pull me into.
So I think this is, does anyone have any questions on what Lynn and I talked about, and then we can just move into chatting. I think that was a really nice introduction to this, to have a discussion about how universities, for example, how we can help in this, because certainly sustainable development goals are more about that question of applied and how can we support impactful work. So, okay, so there's a couple of questions. Wait. That I just opened and then closed. So, question for Lynn. What can we provide to you so that you can connect research groups with foundations? That's from Eric.
What can you provide to us? Well, I think we would just start with a conversation about what your priorities are and what your plan is to ramp up and your time frame, and just kind of get the basics down about what you're looking for so that we can do a scan on what might be out there, and also kind of review our connections with corporations and see if they would be in alignment. So I think it would start with just a basic discussion, and then we would move from there depending on what your needs are.
Eric, does that answer your question? Do you have any further questions?
Yeah, thank you. And maybe what I'll do is with this group, we'll connect with you by email and have a conversation offline about what we're trying to achieve with this particular group.
Yeah, I'd be happy to bring my colleagues into that and talk to you about it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions based on just sort of what Lynn and I presented? Okay. Well, with that, I think we can go just into a general discussion about, you know, and I think what Jake was talking about really lends itself to this conversation, right? So how can we, you know, what would be helpful to you in terms of advancing this kind of work? Or, you know, I think this question of what is the university's role and how do we, you know, our interest with SDGs, but also our interest with Spark, actually, and Amy Kircher's here as my co-lead of that office, is to support teams to look at bigger issues, right? More interdisciplinary, seek funding for sort of more large-scale interdisciplinary programs, go after more large-scale interdisciplinary grants, which I think starts down that path of what is the university's role and how do we take some of our research and apply it. Any thoughts from folks on this?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and ask a question, probably belong to the slide ahead of this, but how does this interact or relate to the sustainable, I think it's called Sustainable Cities project that is in the Humphrey, New Ramaswamy, I think is the lead. And they've got a considerably large group, I believe, that's doing work, would it be apparently in this exact field?
So I don't know if Karen is here still. She's from Humphrey, I think she's gone off. So, I mean, this Sustainable Development Goal Initiative doesn't take any one of these SDGs, right? So, and it's really about fostering groups like the one in Humphrey or the Institute of the Environment, or, you know, we're also talking to the Water Council. So it's more of a, like I said, a catalyst to take work that is already happening, sort of tout it, if you will, promote it, help it link it to new kinds of funding opportunities, support some work around them. So We are going to be issuing a small grant, for example, for SDGs in the next day or so. We, you know, when I say small, I mean small, $5,000 each, but kind of a rapid response. But there'll probably be a series of grants issued, posting, discussions. So it's really, it's not a deep dive into any one SDG. It's really supporting work that people are doing in the SDGs and helping it be, funded better, seek, understand other groups that are doing similar things on campus, facilitating. Does that help?
Yeah, no, I just was kind of surprised they weren't somehow engaged in this, and I don't recognize all the names. Maybe somebody is, but yeah.
Well, this is, we get it's like I always talk about the University of Minnesota as everything is like the elephant, that people touch different parts of it, and you get different group players into different rooms at different times. So we're hoping to make a whole elephant around these topics, but we'll see. So yeah, I mean, we invited a lot of people and only some people come, but there's a lot of groups doing related work on campus to this SDG. So this is not necessarily everybody who could be. Other thoughts? I don't know, Eric, I'm interested in your perspective, having done the collision. It sounds like you're moving forward with some of that, team building that you were interested in. Where do we go from here, from your perspective?
Well, that's always the $1 million question, is where do you go from here? I
well,
think
we hope it's a $50 million question.
Yeah, exactly. With this group, we started to pull together, after that collision, Pat, and then we saw the opportunity to work with Makeda and James and Jake, as sort of a core team. But it struck me that where we still need to go is better define what we want to accomplish, because that first helps us communicate with a funding agency or a foundation. And we can't just say one project is not going to solve every housing problem in the city, let alone the world. So we're working. We're going to have a series of meetings to better define what problem we want to address and what we want to solve. And so I think having regular meetings like this will help, because like I said, even with these sustainable development goals, they're quite broad. And so, the intersection between those goals, the funders' goals, and what we want to do that's relevant to regionally or in Minneapolis, are that's kind of what the Venn diagram looks like in my mind. So, and the other question I had, maybe if I can keep talking, is we're addressing this as there's an opportunity to provide a technical solution to lower the cost of building houses in the city, but we also understand that that's only one facet of a multifaceted problem, and I'm not familiar enough with these funders to know, how do we bring together things like understanding security and transportation and good jobs, and there's all these other things that a housing project will cause a housing project to succeed or fail. Not anything that are not anything to do with the particular house that you put up. And I'm not clear on what speaks to funders, especially foundations, but also kind of what is back to the elephant, You know, we can't swallow the whole elephant in one gulp either. So,
Yeah.
you know, what is the scope of a project that really speaks to these funders?
And I think that's where a conversation about what you can, you know, what's your 5-minute elevator speech? What is the impact from your research or program? You know, what is the opportunity for investment? And then how much is, you know, how much are you looking for? Those are kind of the 3 key things we would bring to a funder. But obviously we would first try to match them pretty well to what their funding interests are. So for, you know, for a Wells Fargo, you know, their interests are going to be tied to their business, right? So their affordable housing probably is going to involve some kind of innovation in financing or public-private partnership, that kind of thing, just to use that as an example. So I guess if you have something that's fully formed and you're looking for funding for a specific thing, we can start with that and find funding, or we can work it the other way. We can say, we know these funders and they are open to being approached, but their priorities are, you know, X, Y, and Z. And then, you know, go back to you and you'd say, yeah, that's not really what we're looking for, or yeah, we could do that.
Yeah. And I think I guess my opinion of where we are, and somebody else jump in, is, you know, we don't have a fully baked cake. We have a list of ingredients and maybe a recipe, but maybe you want to help us in the kitchen to bake the cake a little bit so that it's palatable to the funders. That I think that's where we need to go next.
One of the
I think
things
that's the constant tension, is this, you know, having a very specific community need, developing a very direct response to that need, and then what funders suggest, you know, that very broad overview. And so, you know, you can chase these big broad things, but they may not really be reflective of what really needs to be done or how you want to deliver it. Or you can decide what needs to be done, how you want to deliver it, and hope somebody buys it.
Yep.
You know, and there's just that tension, I think, is real. It's always been there, and it's just part of this. And that's why I enjoy, you know, the conversation here is, you know, how can we flush out that list of ingredients, that recipe, and that need and response in a kind of still generic terms. We haven't done the research yet. We're just proposing, and yet get someone that says that's close enough to where we want to go that will jump in and help you.
You know, but to respectfully just real quick push back, you know, and this is where I think, again, figuring out what the university's role is being a land grant and, you know, academic institution is a very specific problem statement, especially when it comes to, like, let's say UROC's geographic footprint is affordable Black home ownership in North Minneapolis. Okay. Affordable and taking advantage of the single family upzone. I can pin that down right now. And I completely agree that getting further community input about what an affordable unit or a property would look like and what would be prioritized to help drive the costs down and all that is completely within scope. But at the same time, I'm really trying to push people, like, you know, another example is the Met Council's working on some economic development administration strategy planning documents right now. And they're saying, still back to saying things like, you know, inclusive economy. And I want to get more specific about who we're trying to help and what geographic areas we're trying to target and what problem we're trying to solve. If we keep spreading all the equity stuff so paper thin, we're not going to help anyone. We really got to knock something down and really make a model out of it in a very specific place for a very specific set of disadvantaged folks. And if we don't pin that down, I think we're going to end up in the same spot a year from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And I don't want to be there. And no one really does. And that's where I'm kind of trying to, you know, push the conversation. I'm just one voice, but I think we need to get more specific and more explicit about who we're trying to help and what we're trying to do.
The problem is at a you know, which I think sounds like you're very familiar with our university, but you know, I think that is something that everyone's interested in. And forget the elephant. We are the million-headed dragon, right? At the university. Like every single person, I mean, and that's what we're rewarded for. Like that's how we work, is that individual faculty are principal investigators on individual efforts. And then we try and wrangle those things. But from a SDG, from Spark, I think we are starting, and we have new leadership at the university. I think there could be some opportunity to think more institutionally about what are we and how are we working. And so I think that's something we're very interested in. It's not going to be everything. We're still going to be mostly the million-headed dragon, right? I mean, most of our work will still be individual faculty investigators going after individual awards. But these big interdisciplinary kinds of efforts, foundation funding, those are a different monster, and they're not interested in that kind of principal investigator work. And what is our responsibility as a land-grant university? To help in these crisis situations with communities. So, and Mary, I know that's the intersection that Office of Public Engagement has been in for a long time. I don't know if you have anything, thoughts on that.
I don't really have anything to add, Kate. Yeah, that's happening. But I'm in agreement.
I mean, so Mary and I and a few other folks are, I mean, and the SDG group is sort of playing around with the idea of, rather than thinking about it as, well, maybe it's and or both, you know, topical, but then, you know, locational in some ways. So kind of crisis, like you said, Eric, you know, housing has to do with economy and has to do with health and has to do with all these other things. And so really trying to take the kind of SDG framework and apply it to crisis communities that are in crisis. We're starting with food, you know, food security, because there's so many communities that are in extreme food security crisis right now, including, you know, my own neighborhood, which is in South Minneapolis. But we also, like this University COVID Action Network, that's like the main thing what we got asked to do is try and help communities that are literally afraid they're going to run out of food. You know, like they feel like they're not going to have food for the winter. And so, you know, really trying to think more systemically about food and all the different feelers around it, and convene groups that are working under different umbrellas within the SDG to take the SDGs as a framework to look at the whole system, like the resilience of a community. And I think housing fits into that, food fits into that, health fits into that. But to your point, like, I'm not sure we can fix these problems unless we think about it that way.
I think too that if you're talking about, you know, $10,000 to a couple $100,000 in grant money, you can have many individual projects. If you're going to a funder and you want millions of dollars, the funder wants to know that it's a university priority. And I think to Jake's point, you have to sort of pick a favorite child and go forward with it. Everybody can't get the $1 million, but one project could get the $1 million. So,
well, we could also create a community of people working on a problem that are each getting the $100,000.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so we're still creating kind of a more systems-based approach.
Yeah, you can do. It's not one or the other. It's both. But if it's going to be the big money, they're going to want to see some. It's got to be interdisciplinary, and having the university support as a priority helps.
Well, I think the university also being more responsive. Sorry, go ahead.
Interdisciplinary, along with crossing boundaries. One of the priorities for UROC over the next few years is to work on urban-rural connections. And so we see Duluth as urban, and we see North Minneapolis as urban. But I believe that if we are working on these problems in a way that has us looking at our assets symbiotically, that we'll be able to change the state. So
I agree.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add that small piece.
But we have to think more institutionally about what we're doing, I think. Yeah. So that's exciting. No, I think this is an exciting conversation. So thank you. We're over. So if you have any last thoughts, if you wouldn't mind just putting them in chat, and we'll be looking at those, and we'll share this video. And if you're interested in, you know, hosting a further conversation or further meetings, I know Abby had put in the chat that she's interested in us choosing one of the proposals and maybe one or two and really focusing on that. So we'll look into that and see if there's one that, if there's any one of those that stand out that you think would be helpful to have a collision around, we'd be happy to do that.
I am sorry, I'm way over to my next meeting, but I
know, I'm sorry, we have to go.
It's okay, it's okay. I wanted to say that, you know, to really put a plug for hosting specific ones focused on specific, maybe RFPs. And then the other thing too is to reinforce the idea that I think it was the speaker from HUD that was saying, you know, I think, you know, we're at a critical point in our state now. We're on the map for lots of inequities, you know, the pandemic and, you know, the systemic racism. And I think that, you know, we really need to find opportunities to bring people together to go for large funding opportunities to really actually address those problems in the communities. You know, for example, in the, Mikeda is probably might be able to speak more about this because it came from the Office of Public Engagement. We recently signed a MOU or MOA with a community partner, Renewable Energy Partners in North Minneapolis, and some of their work focuses on workforce development, education. I think we're going to need strategies like that to work with communities that are on ground to actually address all these inequities and problems in our communities, you know. So sorry, I need to leave now. Thank you.
I know we all do. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
And yeah, we'll work on it. Let us know if you need anything.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Katie. Thanks, Lynn.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.